This Pecha Kucha attempts to provide a brief account of the potato famine in Ireland in the mid-19th century. My choice of the topic was grounded on a personal sympathy for the oppressed, and no doubt this event in the history of Ireland proves that the Irish can certainly be counted among the downtrodden peoples. Let's make the setting clear first. The country, better known as the Republic of Ireland, is located in 26 of the 32 counties of the namesake island. The capital and largest city is Dublin, and the sovereign state shares its only land border with Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. The Republic is otherwise surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, with the Celtic Sea to the south, St. George's Channel to the southeast, and the Irish Sea to the east. Roughly 84,000 square kilometers, it is 5 times smaller than Germany and 40 times smaller than Argentina, nearing the 5 million inhabitants. Now, our first character in this story is the potato. The first to cultivate potatoes around the world were the Incas in South America around 7000 before Common Era. In the 1500s, the Spanish invaders discovered the potato's flavors and carried the crop to the so-called Old Continent. Sir Walter Raleigh introduced potatoes to Ireland in the late 1500s on the lands near Cork. These plantations started as a garden crop of the gentry, and they were not popular at first. However, after an unusual promotion campaign by landowners and members of royalty, it rose in popularity. At the same time, the Celtic lands of Ireland had been used to pasture cows for centuries. But when the British colonized the Irish, much of their countryside was turned into an extended grazing land to raise cattle for a hungry British consumer market. The British taste for beef had a devastating impact on the impoverished Irish. The best pasture land was pushed off and the Irish were forced to far smaller plots of marginal land, reason why they turned to the potato, a crop that grew abundantly in less favorable soil. Eventually, agriculturalists found potatoes easier to grow and cultivate than other staple crops such as wheat and oats. Finally, cows took over much of Ireland, leaving the native population virtually dependent on the potato for survival. By the 1800s, the potato had become a staple food of the poor, especially in winter. Furthermore, a disproportionate share of the potatoes grown in Ireland were of a single variety, known as the Irish lumper. Until in 1845, the potato blight hit Ireland. It was a disease of the plants which spread from North America to Europe, known as Phytophthora infestans, a pathogen fungus which, favored by moist and cool environments, causes a serious potato disease. Potatoes infected with the blight are shrunken on the outside and corky as well as rotted in the inside. These can have devastating effects by destroying entire crops. Even today, with many chemical options in agriculture for the control of both damage to the foliage and infections, the blight is still a difficult disease to control. During the Great Hunger, the losses were catastrophic to the people who lived in rural Ireland because of their forced and complete dependence on the potato. About 1 million people died and more than 1 million fled the country, causing the population to fall by 20 to 25%. Apart from the crop blight in itself, not only the widespread dependency on the single crop, but also the lack of genetic variability among the potato plants, which is called a monoculture, were part of the reasons why the emergence of the epidemic had such devastating effects in Ireland and in similar areas of Europe. The unpredictable played its part, but the political responsibilities of the effects of this crisis cannot be overlooked. From 1801 to 1922, Ireland was ruled directly by British Westminster as part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. But in the face of adversity, the British government left too much to be desired, because from 1846, the impact of the blight was exacerbated by the British Whig government's economic policy of laissez-faire capitalism. They deliberately did nothing to aid the starving people. Laissez-faire liberal policies are founded on the principle that economic transactions need to be free from any form of state interventionism. Therefore, under the pretext of letting the physical order of nature self-regulate itself, the British abandoned the Irish till they starved to death. The Potato Famine was considered a genocide in the history of Ireland, and it lasted until 1852. Its effects permanently changed the island's demographic, political, and cultural landscape, producing an estimated 2 million refugees and spurring a century-long population decline. However, the silver lining is that the Great Hunger influenced much of the unrest in the widespread European revolutions of 1848. The famine became part of the long story of betrayal and exploitation which led to the growing movement in Ireland for independence, which finally took place in 1922. I firstly learned about the potato famine through a sonnet by the Irish poet Seamus Heaney, inspired on a painting which depicts a rural scene with the highlights on the common workers. The poem refers to the suffering of the Irish people in the famine in the hands of a British ruling class due to the political conflict. In 1995, the potato became the first vegetable to be grown in space for feeding future space colonies. But today, according to the UN, nearly 700 million people go to bed on an empty stomach each night. So what? It seems that centuries of so-called advancements have little to do with addressing basic human needs, and perhaps it's high time we revise our priorities. Thank you very much for your attention.